History does not remember the loudest voices in moments of crisis. It remembers the few who stood still while the world around them trembled. In every age, chaos reveals a simple truth about human nature. Most people are ruled by their emotions. Fear clouds their judgment, anger blinds their reason, and desperation drives them to actions they later regret. When pressure rises, crowds fracture, alliances weaken, and even the confident begin to collapse under the weight of uncertainty. Yet within this storm stands a different kind of individual, one who does not rush, one who does not react, one who watches. To remain calm while others crumble is not a natural gift. It is a discipline, a form of quiet power that separates the strategist from the victim of circumstance. Those who master this discipline gain something far greater than peace of mind. They gain control over situations that terrify everyone else. This philosophy, often hidden within the lessons of power and leadership, reveals that composure is not weakness, but strategy. When emotions dominate the battlefield of human interaction, the calm mind becomes the sharpest weapon, and in 7 critical situations where most people lose themselves completely, calmness becomes the difference between collapse and control. In the theater of human affairs, chaos is not a rare visitor. It appears in markets that collapse without warning, in arguments that ignite like dry tinder, in betrayals that unfold behind polite smiles, and in the sudden moments when certainty dissolves into confusion. In these moments, most people reveal the fragile architecture of their character. They panic, they speak too quickly, they react before understanding what truly stands before them. Their emotions surge forward like uncontrolled armies, destroying their own positions before the enemy has even moved. What is commonly mistaken for courage in such moments is often nothing more than frantic movement, an attempt to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. Yet there exists a different response, a rarer and far more powerful one. It is the response of composure. Composure in chaos is not passivity, nor is it indifference. It is a deliberate restraint, a calculated stillness that allows the mind to observe while others are consumed by their impulses. When fear spreads through a crowd, the calm individual becomes immediately distinct, not because they shout louder or demand attention, but because they do not surrender their judgment to the emotional storm that surrounds them. In a world governed by reaction, the one who refuses to react becomes the most difficult person to manipulate. This principle is deeply aligned with the philosophy associated with Niccolò Machiavelli, who understood that power often belongs not to the strongest, but to the most controlled. Those who master themselves gain influence over those who cannot master their own emotions. When a crisis erupts, most people instinctively seek reassurance. They look around the room for signals of stability, searching for someone whose behavior suggests that the situation is still under control. The individual who remains calm, who neither panics nor overreacts, quietly becomes that signal. Consider how quickly authority emerges in such moments. Authority does not always come from titles or formal power. It often arises from perception. When others see someone thinking clearly while they themselves feel overwhelmed, they begin to assign that person a certain weight of credibility. Calmness becomes a silent declaration of competence. Even if that perception is not entirely justified, it begins to reshape the dynamics of the situation. Those who panic lose influence. Those who remain composed gain it. Chaos exposes another weakness in human nature, the tendency to reveal too much too quickly. When pressure rises, people speak impulsively. They disclose their fears, their frustrations, their doubts. They argue, they defend themselves, they accuse others. In doing so, they expose their motivations and vulnerabilities to anyone who is patient enough to observe them. The calm individual, by contrast, gathers information without revealing much about their own intentions. Silence becomes a form of intelligence gathering. Every emotional outburst from others becomes a clue. Every hurried decision becomes a mistake that can later be understood and perhaps even used. This is why composure should not be mistaken for mere personality. It is a strategic position. The person who remains calm in chaos preserves their most valuable resource, clarity of thought. When the mind is flooded with fear or anger, the ability to think strategically disappears. Decisions become short-sighted, designed only to escape immediate discomfort. Such decisions rarely consider long-term consequences. Entire careers, alliances, and reputations have been destroyed in a single moment of uncontrolled emotion. History is filled with leaders who lost everything, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they allowed a moment of chaos to dictate their actions. The composed individual avoids this trap. By refusing to surrender to emotional pressure, they buy time, time to observe, time to think, time to calculate. Time is a powerful ally in moments of disorder, because chaos rarely maintains its intensity forever. Panic burns brightly but briefly. As the initial shock fades, those who reacted impulsively often find themselves trapped by their own earlier decisions. Words cannot easily be withdrawn, and reckless actions create consequences that must eventually be faced. The calm individual, having avoided those premature commitments, remains flexible. They are free to adapt their strategy as the situation becomes clearer. Another advantage of composure lies in the realm of perception. People often assume that the person who appears calm must possess hidden knowledge or superior understanding. Even when this assumption is not entirely accurate, it shapes the behavior of others. Opponents hesitate before confronting someone who does not appear shaken by the circumstances. Allies gravitate toward the individual who seems stable in uncertain conditions. The calm figure becomes a center of gravity in the social environment, attracting influence simply by maintaining control over their demeanor. There is also a psychological dimension to this phenomenon. Humans are naturally affected by emotional contagion. Fear spreads rapidly within groups, just as anger or excitement can infect entire crowds. However, calmness can also spread. When someone consistently refuses to participate in panic, their presence begins to counterbalance the emotional atmosphere around them. Others may gradually slow their reactions, reconsider their assumptions, or seek guidance from the person who appears unaffected by the chaos. Machiavellian philosophy recognizes the usefulness of such psychological leverage. Control over one's emotions is not merely a personal virtue, it is a political instrument. In negotiations, conflicts, and competitions, the person who maintains composure forces their opponent into a difficult position. The opponent must either mirror that calmness, which requires discipline they may not possess, or continue reacting emotionally, thereby placing themselves at a disadvantage. This dynamic becomes particularly powerful when the situation involves uncertainty. Uncertainty is the breeding ground of fear, and fear encourages people to make irrational decisions. Markets crash because investors panic. Organizations fracture because individuals assume the worst intentions in others. Relationships deteriorate because anger replaces thoughtful communication. In each of these scenarios, chaos grows not only from external events, but from the emotional reactions of the people involved. The calm individual interrupts this chain reaction. By refusing to contribute to the emotional escalation, they create a different rhythm within the situation. Instead of accelerating the chaos, they slow it. Instead of amplifying fear, they contain it within themselves. This does not mean they are unaffected by what is happening. True composure does not require the absence of emotion. It requires the ability to govern emotion. Fear may still exist internally, but it is managed rather than displayed. Doubt may arise, but it does not dictate behavior. Such discipline often requires preparation long before chaos arrives. The mind must be trained to tolerate uncertainty, to resist the urge for immediate action when action would be premature. Many people believe that quick responses demonstrate strength, yet strategic patience often proves far more powerful. The calm individual understands that the first reaction is rarely the wisest one. They observe how others behave under pressure. They notice who becomes defensive, who becomes aggressive, who becomes silent, and who begins searching for someone to blame. Each reaction reveals something about the character and motivations of those involved. Information accumulates quietly, building a clearer map of the situation than any impulsive reaction could provide. In this way, chaos transforms into an environment rich with opportunity for the person who can maintain composure. While others struggle simply to regain emotional balance, the calm observer is already several steps ahead, understanding the shifting dynamics and preparing a response that aligns with long-term advantage. Composure therefore becomes a form of strategic invisibility. The calm individual does not draw unnecessary attention to themselves, yet their influence gradually expands as others exhaust themselves through emotional turbulence. Decisions made with patience begin to shape outcomes that impulsive actors could not foresee. The noise of panic fades into the background, leaving the quiet calculations of the composed mind to guide the direction of events. The individual who learns to remain calm in moments of chaos gradually discovers that panic is not the inevitable ruler of crisis, but merely the common response of those who have never learned to command themselves. And once a person recognizes that most of the world is governed by uncontrolled emotion, The discipline of composure begins to feel less like restraint and more like a rare form of freedom that allows the mind to move clearly while the storm of human reaction continues to swirl around it without dictating the course of one's actions. Human beings often imagine themselves as rational creatures, guided by logic and deliberate thought. Yet when one observes the behavior of people under pressure, a different truth becomes evident. Most decisions are not born from careful reasoning, but from emotion. Fear accelerates judgment, anger sharpens hostility, pride resists compromise, and humiliation drives individuals toward reckless attempts to restore their dignity. These emotional currents flow beneath nearly every human interaction, shaping actions more powerfully than reason itself. The individual who understands this dynamic gains an unusual advantage, for mastery over one's emotions is not merely a personal discipline, but a strategic instrument capable of shaping the behavior of others. The philosophy often associated with Machiavellian thought does not pretend that people are easily guided by virtue or wisdom. Instead, it begins with a sober recognition of human nature. People are impulsive, they are sensitive to insult, they fear loss more than they value stability. When their emotions are disturbed, they become predictable in their unpredictability. Their reactions may appear chaotic, but they are governed by simple psychological pressures that repeat themselves across generations and cultures. Anger demands retaliation, fear demands escape, pride demands recognition, desperation demands immediate relief. Those who cannot control these impulses become prisoners of them. Emotional control therefore becomes a form of liberation from manipulation. When someone provokes anger, they are often attempting to pull their opponent into a reaction that can be exploited. A heated argument rarely benefits both sides equally. One participant usually hopes the other will lose composure first, revealing weakness or making statements that can later be used against them. The person who maintains calm in such a moment disrupts the strategy entirely. By refusing to react with anger, they deny their opponent the emotional leverage they sought to create. This restraint transforms the structure of conflict. Instead of two individuals locked in mutual escalation, there is now a clear imbalance. One side remains governed by emotion, while the other continues observing with clarity. The calm individual retains control over timing, choosing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to act. The emotional opponent, meanwhile, exposes more of their intentions with every impulsive reaction. Strategic dominance does not always require force. Often it arises from patience and self-command. In negotiations, for example, emotional reactions frequently weaken one's position. A negotiator who becomes visibly frustrated reveals that they need the agreement more urgently than they previously admitted. A negotiator who becomes overly enthusiastic reveals that the proposed outcome benefits them greatly. Both reactions provide valuable information to the opposing side. Emotional signals become bargaining tools, whether intentionally or not. The individual who maintains emotional discipline avoids revealing such signals. Their expressions remain measured, their responses remain deliberate. Others may attempt to provoke them, hoping to uncover their true priorities, yet these attempts yield little information. Over time, uncertainty begins to shift toward those who rely on emotional pressure. They cannot easily predict the calm individual's next move, and unpredictability itself becomes a strategic advantage. There is also a deeper psychological dimension to emotional control. When individuals lose control of their emotions, they narrow their perspective. Anger, for example, tends to simplify the world into allies and enemies. Fear simplifies the world into threats and escapes. Pride simplifies the world into respect and insult. These simplified frameworks may feel powerful in the moment, but they often lead to decisions that ignore complex realities. Relationships are damaged, opportunities are overlooked, and consequences are underestimated. The disciplined mind resists this narrowing of perspective. Emotional control allows the individual to examine multiple possibilities, even while others become trapped within a single emotional narrative. A calm person in the midst of conflict can consider not only immediate reactions, but also the long-term effects of each choice. They can evaluate how today's actions might influence tomorrow's alliances, reputations, and opportunities. Such foresight is difficult for those governed by emotion. Anger demands immediate satisfaction, and fear demands immediate safety. The emotional individual sacrifices the future for the sake of the present moment, while the emotionally disciplined individual preserves the ability to shape outcomes that extend far beyond the immediate conflict. Machiavellian philosophy often emphasizes the importance of perception in maintaining influence. Emotional control plays a central role in this process, because people constantly interpret the behavior of those around them. When someone appears easily provoked, others learn that provoking them can be a useful tactic. When someone appears anxious, others learn that pressure will eventually force concessions. But when someone consistently maintains composure, their psychological profile becomes far more difficult to exploit. This difficulty creates a form of strategic respect. Opponents begin to approach such individuals with greater caution. They realize that emotional manipulation will likely fail, forcing them to engage in more careful and rational interaction. In this way, emotional control reshapes the environment itself. The disciplined individual does not merely protect themselves from manipulation, they gradually alter the strategies that others use in their presence. Another important element of emotional control is the ability to separate feeling from action. Humans cannot completely eliminate their emotions, nor should they attempt to do so. Emotions often contain useful information about threats, opportunities, and social dynamics. The key difference lies in whether emotion dictates behavior or merely informs it. The emotionally disciplined individual acknowledges their feelings without allowing those feelings to command their decisions. For instance, experiencing anger does not require acting angrily. Feeling fear does not require displaying fear. The mind can register these emotions while still choosing responses that align with strategic objectives rather than immediate impulses. This internal separation between feeling and action creates a powerful sense of autonomy. Instead of being dragged along by emotional currents, the individual becomes capable of steering their own conduct, even under intense pressure. This ability becomes especially valuable in environments where power struggles are subtle rather than overt. Offices, political arenas, and social networks often operate through indirect competition rather than open confrontation. In such environments, emotional outbursts can permanently damage credibility. A single moment of visible frustration may confirm suspicions that someone lacks discipline. A moment of panic may convince others that a person is not prepared for leadership. The individual who maintains emotional composure, however, projects stability. Stability attracts trust, and trust often translates into influence. People prefer to align themselves with those who appear capable of managing pressure without collapsing under its weight. Emotional control therefore becomes not only a defensive mechanism, but also a method of building authority. This authority grows gradually through repeated demonstrations of self-command. Each time chaos arises and the individual remains calm, observers update their perception of that person's reliability. Each time provocation occurs and the individual refuses to react impulsively, their reputation for discipline strengthens. Over time, this reputation becomes a form of silent power that precedes them into new situations. Strategic dominance ultimately depends on the ability to shape outcomes rather than merely react to them. Emotional individuals often surrender this ability without realizing it. Their reactions become predictable, allowing others to guide their behavior through carefully placed provocations or pressures. The emotionally disciplined individual breaks this cycle. Because their responses are not easily provoked or predicted, they retain greater freedom in determining when and how to act. In moments when others feel overwhelmed by anger, fear, or humiliation, the disciplined mind continues to observe the broader landscape of human motives and shifting alliances, recognizing that every emotional outburst from another person reveals not only their immediate frustration, but also the deeper insecurities and desires that guide their decisions. And with this awareness, the calm strategist begins to see that emotional restraint is not merely an internal virtue, but a powerful instrument through which the unpredictable behavior of others can be understood, anticipated, and quietly guided toward outcomes that favor the one who remains master of themselves while the rest surrender their judgment to the restless turbulence of their own emotions.